6 months, it could be 9 months, it could be a year. It would empower the Trump administration to do what they want to do, and he was concerned for the governmental employees and those that were dependent upon that income to be able to exist for whatever period of time. What response do you have to what Senator Schumer has laid out as being his reason to say that I couldn't let this hurt hit the American people, and especially with the uncertainty as to the period of time that the shutdown would occur?
The 50 days since President Donald Trump became inaugurated as president of the United States weren't enough to move Charlie Schumer to understand that something different has to be done? That the way in which he's conducted himself and the way in which he runs the Senate by its old traditions and old rules aren't enough for Charlie Schumer to understand that he is dealing in a different world? Could he be any further out of touch with the American people? And it appears he ought to learn something from the gentleman from Vermont. Clearly, Bernie Sanders is in touch with the people and what's going on. Can he dismiss tens of thousands of people in Maryland and around our country who are showing up to hear Bernie Sanders while he's canceling his book tour because he doesn't want to face the music? What kind of deafness from the Senate Democratic leader are we truly looking at? And when did it start? Is it amnesia? Is it Alzheimer's? Is it old-timers disease? What world is Charlie Schumer living in that does not let him understand that the rules that he has functioned under historically have fundamentally changed, and that the poor themselves are being affected? And what Donald Trump wants to do is give the biggest tax break in human history to the billionaire class. And he will gut every federal program, every federal job to get to that tax cut. And he's got a welcoming audience in Republicans in Congress and the Senate who are prepared to pass it and deliver that tax cut to his desk. What are your thoughts about that?
Exactly. And, and I want people to understand that when we talk about the fact that people will die if you cut Medicaid, even worse than where we have these states that still are failing to provide full coverage. But do understand, folks, that I believe, and I don't care what nobody tells me, but I'm going to try to be a little open-minded, but I believe that Elon Musk and his Teal and the rest of them, they want people to die. This is no accident. You got to people. I mean, I'm serious, folks. Look up the entire. Look up Chuck Vargan, and who is one of the people they follow. Look up this entire new eugenics movement that's going on in the world, but that they embrace, where they believe that certain people, including some white people, are inferior and are genetically inferior. You got to understand where these people are coming from. When you say, listen, people are dying in Africa, they're not crying. They're like, yeah, right. When you say folks are going to die who are poor, they're like, yeah, right, because they believe in their heads and in their crazy minds that if you're poor, that's some sign of your inferiority. We got to understand the mental sickness that is driving the policy of some of these people. One thing, Congressman, one thing, Reverend Jackson, that Schumer also had said is that he was worried about the low rating of the Democrats. We do know that the recent CNN poll said that they have only a 27% favorability rating with the public. I think that's in contrast to about 41% for the Republicans, for the GOP. Nobody talked about it, but I believe that's what I saw. And in a CNN poll also found only 29% favorability rating for the Democrats. And he said that one of his problems was that if there had been a shutdown, that the Dems would be incapable of effectively messaging, getting out their message, getting out their point that you were saying they would have the opportunity to make. How do you respond to all of that? Because that's something I keep hearing over and over and over again.
Well, maybe he anticipated that the messaging would be calling for his ouster as Senate leader. It's hard to imagine that he contemplated that, and that's exactly what is happening. They're talking about primarying Chuck Schumer and primarying Dick Durbin and primarying 8 other senators, and some have even talked about third-party campaigns against those Democrats who did not vote, who voted for that budget resolution. Did Chuck Schumer consider that in his messaging thinking, or was he just playing some kind of insider game because the first person who thanked him for the 10 Democrats who voted for the budget resolution was none other than President Donald Trump? So it's hard to imagine and what the world would look like if, in fact, there were different Democratic leadership. I mean, in this hour, I can really hear Jasmine Crockett. I can hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I can hear on some days Hakeem Jeffries. I can hear just about every day Al Green. And so in what world do you imagine where those voices are silenced and the silent voices in the Democratic Party are the ones that they want to install or hand leadership to? It is hard to imagine a world where black women overwhelmingly voted for the Democratic nominee just a few short months ago, and black men overwhelmingly voted for the Democratic nominee just a few short months ago, and then Melissa Slotkin be selected to offer the Democratic response as a white woman for white women who did not vote for the Democratic nominee just 4 months ago. It's just hard to imagine what world they are living in that tells us, oh, Rahm Emanuel needs to get a new look. Oh, J.B. Pritzker should get a look. Josh Shapiro, who couldn't win the state of Pennsylvania for Kamala Harris, he should get a new look. It's just hard to imagine the world that they are living in when William Barber, minister at Yale University, and Roland Martin have a event at the same time as the president's speech that is overwhelmingly better received than anything that the Democrats have offered as an alternative message.
Wow. You know, I just was looking up, I put in congressman, and guess what came up immediately? That shows this whole, the power of a voice. Everybody if you've been watching the news, you saw that Congressman John Lawson went off. He went totally off on his Republican and Democratic colleagues and said, what is Congress for? If we can't hold a president in check, especially one who's out of control, who's hurting people, who's doing damaging things to our nation, damaging things, to foreign policy. I mean, he went off. And when I put in the word congressman, his name came up immediately. Why? Because he's been out there saying something. Silence doesn't buy you anything. Acquiescence, all this compliance, people, you can't capitulate. Whoa, I'm so happy that you're bringing that to us. Let's talk about another aspect of this. How in the world do you capitulate when the president himself has some of the worst favorability ratings ever? What did you make out of that?
And then they wonder why their own favorability ratings are somewhere around 29% or even less in the minds of the American people, because Al Green is better known than many Democratic leaders at this hour.
Yes.
Jasmine Crockett is better known than many Democratic leaders at this hour. And I can only imagine that if Reverend Jesse Jackson were far more healthier than he is, that he would see the political landscape and say, hey, I'm back. I mean, that's how he would see it. And so, keep hope alive. Stand for something. Now is your time, Barbara Arnwine. You are the leader that we are looking for, Brother Jones. The idea that somehow people who only see their own election are somehow going to fight to preserve democracy and fight for us is not likely to happen. And let me tell you one of the things we can start with. I'm looking for somebody who's running for president who has 500 executive orders already ready when they get elected. I mean, ain't no need in just accepting this process that we're going through as some kind of new normalcy or some kind of new normal. I'd like to see, and I'd like them to be constitutionally vetted by Lawrence Tribe and by Harvard and by all of the administrations, so that when they get in on day one, I'd like them to see them publish a book. If I were your president, these are the 500 executive orders that I plan to overwhelm the judiciary with on day one. How about that? As something that we can build around, on the environment, on health care, on housing, on rehiring federal workers, on settling lawsuits. What 1,500 people will the next Democrat on day one pardon? There's just got to be 1,500 Negroes out here worthy of forgiveness. There just has to be. Out of 70 million people. I believe I'm one. So the point is,
yes,
what kind of agenda are we coming forward with that is going to be the 180-degree opposite of what we are experiencing? Or, as they say, are we going to spend the next 2 decades or longer unraveling what Donald Trump has done?
My,
and Congressman, one of the things that I've pushed and I continue to push is that the Democratic Party right now, by my estimation, is just in a shambles. It really is. I just can't imagine that you have 213 members of Congress that vote that stay in line to say we're going to fight this continuing resolution, one that went off on her own way, and thinking that the Senate Democrats were going to have their back. And then when it gets over there, they find out the Senate Democrats, the leadership of the Senate Democrats, didn't have their back. And I just can't imagine. If we're looking, because we've got to remember, right, that the Democratic Party right now came into this fight looking weak, looking beaten. What direction were they going to take? What moves were they going to make? The first thing that I saw that come out was with Congressman Al Green when he's waving his cane during the joint session of Congress, that showing some fight back. Then we saw, with AOC, when she went for the leadership position, she was denied the leadership position. It seems as though the Democratic Party is in shambles right now with regards to what it needs to do to represent the people that support it. But more importantly, and this is what I wanted to ask you, doesn't this also present an opportunity for the Gen Zs and the young millennials to now step in and show what leadership looks like, that there's this crack that's there, that now they need to be running for some of these positions? Isn't that what AOC, the push for AOC does in New York for the Senate race?
Absolutely. Now, you are aware that if she runs as a senator, she cannot run as a House member at the same time. So she may be measuring very, very carefully whether or not she can actually defeat Chuck Schumer in New York. And then there's this question of, who would Eric Adams support? Where would black people be on the question of AOC, which could leave her, her voice out of the entire process. So I'm sure she has to weigh a lot. But clearly she has an extraordinarily bright future. Jasmine Crockett has a bright future. And there are others within the Congress that have a bright future. But, we've never had more blacks in Congress than we do at this hour.
Yes.
60. We've never had more Latinos in Congress than we have at this hour. Together they come to about 100 members of the Democratic caucus. And I'm afraid to say overwhelmingly they are quiet. And I'd like to see some of them retire. Some of them need to go home.
Woo-hoo!
They've had great runs in Congress. I think some of them are hanging around because they want the last thing they do on Capitol Hill to be laid up in the rotunda somewhere so everybody can come visit them, and then we can ship them all back to their cities and to their states where they're from so they can have a certain kind of service. My sense is that's what this is about. And so some of our leaders in the Congress belong in a museum of natural history.